Well, I really liked listening to Greg and to Charles. Well, I didn't like listening to Charles. I was ready to throw eggs at him, but it was good to at least know what we're up against. Maggie's theme about organizing and getting organized and being a community organizer, I couldn't agree with more. I am, however, going to ratchet it up just a little bit. I produced this a couple of years ago, and I think I've probably said it to a lot of you, but I'm going to read it again because I think it's important. There was a case in Australia 25 years ago where a gentleman was on trial for being an activist. That was what he was accused of, being an activist or an agitator. And at the end of the day, Mr. Justice Murphy made his ruling. And this is what Mr. Justice Murphy said. If he is an agitator, he is in good company. Many of the great religious and political figures of history have been agitators, and human progress owes much to the efforts of these and the many who are unknown. Quoting Oscar Wilde, Mr. Justice Murphy concluded, agitators are a set of interfering, meddling people who come down to some perfectly contented class of the community and sow the seeds of discontent among them. That is the reason why agitators are so absolutely necessary. Without them, there would be no advance towards civilization. So be an organizer, but also be an activist. I think that is something that we really need to do, especially having heard what Charles Pattison had to tell us about what's going on in Tallahassee. The topic that I have today is about sunshine. And I have stolen a line from, well, I've perverted a line from Henry Ford, "The public be dimmed." Florida has extremely strong, and has had, we'll see if the legislature gets its hands on that, Open Meetings and Public Records Act laws that are very vital to all of us in following what's going on in government, doing what Charles and Maggie have suggested that we do, educate ourselves, get the facts, find out what's going on. We do this primarily through the Sunshine Law, the Open Meetings Law, which allows the public to attend and observe meetings of our local officials and boards, and also through the Public Records Act, which allows us to ask for and obtain records from government on just about any topic. Now, in your packet, there's two things that you should look at. One is 10 practical tips for the Public Records Act requester. This is just a little primer on asking for public records, how to go about it, how to maybe make the best out of a lot of the responses that you get from some government officials who are not so keen on turning over what they're supposed to turn over. At the very end of the packet, we've provided the actual language of the Florida Open Meetings Act, the Sunshine Law, which is just a couple of pages. And then the first couple of pages of the Public Records Act, which tells you what you're entitled to get, which is essentially any record that's made in the course of government. The very last page is only the first page of the exemptions to the Public Records Act, which unfortunately are growing every year. The legislature throws on another couple of exemptions. At the bottom of the page, it's written many pages more. There really are about 15 pages of exemptions. I was in Tampa yesterday at a Florida Bar media conference in which we were told there are 4,000 exemptions to the Public Records Act. I didn't know that, but 4,000 exemptions. You can't get a lot of stuff. But there's still a lot of stuff you can get, and I urge you to do that. I urge you to get information, know what you're talking about, get the facts, and one way you do that is you get the records that set out the reasons why the government is or is not doing something. There are 3 areas right now that are on the top of my priority list, as Donna put it. Where'd she go? As Donna put it back there. I always have way too much going on, but the top 3 right now is something we meaning a lot of folks in the community have been battling for quite some time, which is the use of the consent agenda at commission meetings to hide things from the public. The consent agenda is part of the agenda, and in Martin County, it's usually number 4, I think. Number 1 is approve the agenda, and number 2 is proclamations, and number 3 maybe comments, and number 4 is the consent agenda. So when you look at the agenda, everything that's under Article 4 is something that's not going to be heard. Nobody's going to speak about it. Nobody's going to talk about it. It's something that once the commission approves the agenda, everything on that consent agenda is automatically approved. And we found when we started looking at the consent agenda a little closer that there were quasi-judicial proceedings, there were amendments to PUDs, things that require the board to hear people testify and take evidence, and these things were being put on the consent agenda and just passed without anybody knowing it. Commissioner Hurd and Commissioner Fielding have been very, very valuable in helping to pull things off the consent agenda and require public discussion of some of these items. And Commissioner Hurd even managed to somehow bamboozle her fellow commissioners into actually adopting a policy not to put any more consent agenda items, any more quasi-judicial items on the consent agenda. So that pulled off a big portion of my concern. However, before I came in here today, I looked at the consent agenda for this Tuesday's meeting, and I just didn't have enough time to go through it. I probably spent a couple of hours, and I'm trying to read all this stuff that's on the consent agenda. So we're getting back, I think, to putting way too much stuff on the consent agenda. And the concern that I have...
Could you explain quasi-judicial?
Quasi-judicial is, it's not a judicial proceeding in a court.